Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever you happenstance onto this Truth Bomb riff. My name is Patrick Lovell, and I'm coming to you on Sunday, November 17th, 2024, at approximately 1 p.m. my time. And I hope this finds you well. I hope that however you find your place in this world, that you're coping in some way. But you're thinking about things. I really hope that you're thinking about things. And if you are, I hope that you're thinking about really delving into what I'm going to reveal to you, which I have been revealing to you for, I don't know, however many 530 plus truth bombs I've done over the course of the last 2.5 years, plus all of the work that I've continued to put out there. That is the intersection of everything that we're in the midst of. And usually when I hit record on these things, my mind's pinballing all over the place because I want to make some points and I want to try to do it in a short amount of time, but I want to shoot from the hip and the heart, and I don't want to script it, but at the same time, I want to keep it short. And that's a very tough thing to do while reacting to everything that's in the 24-hour cycle to try to set the table for a reality and use it as kind of a backdoor pathway into who I am and what I'm revealing to you, and try to hit all the prescient points. And it's hard, in some capacities I've made, I don't know, I think maybe inroads that I should be grateful and thankful for. But in other ways, I'm kind of like, all has been revealed, but at the same time, I know what I'm up against, and I feel like it's Groundhog Day. And I'm explaining to people the world that we live in, but the bandwidth and the curation of information, and the sort of tidal wave of misinformation and disinformation and anger and hatred and where do you go and all of these other things that are at play that most of us don't have a clue about. But we're also inundated with a whole lot of fuckery and fake accounts and everything else. And that's why I've been attempting to get your attention for a very long time, because I'm real. I'm not AI. Although I will tell you that the information that constitutes my journey went into AI, and I provided about a third of what it was based on transcripts and scripts and some information. And AI was able to generate this magnificent image in all but 3 minutes that encapsulated who I am. And maybe I'll, plug that in as a picture as the meme on my, post for this, and maybe I'll spread it around. But it basically surmised that I'm this guy standing in front of this massive maze made of money for the most part. And it's this really sort of very dark and sinister portrait. And you see this giant maze and the money everywhere and time, and then lightning bolts and shadows and clouds and all of this menacing sort of thing with gargoyles that are sitting in front of the Supreme Court. And that's my journey. And I don't know why I'm laughing, because, I could have like many, many years ago just basically played the game the way the game is played. And hindsight is 2020. But if I would have just done things that I now know, could have got me in a different position, I would have taken that and just played the game the way the game is played. But unfortunately, yeah, I went down on this journey, and I'm a producer and I'm a muckraking journalist. And yeah, for better or for worse, I believe in liberty and justice for all above all else, and democracy and dynamism and freedom. And that's who I've always been. I'm from X generation. I just recently turned 56 years old. I've been a producer and in the business of, developing entertainment or documentary or film and fiction and all manner, shape, or form of, creative enterprise in the communications medium for now 30 plus years. And I'm holding the largest revelation of the largest criminal conspiracy and cover up in history that never ended. That is what this entire system has hid from you. Now, one of my ultimate taglines, and I've been saying this for a long time for those of you who have heard me, and I hope maybe you'll hashtag this and share it and so on and so forth. But my ultimate nemesis, my ultimate hatred, that the thing that I cannot live with, is fascism. And the ultimate formula for how this whole thing works is corruption births and fuels fascism. And now, on the other side of this election, if that's what you want to call it, and all of the different insanity that's around it, it's the ultimate death knell in the back of of democracy. It literally is a you know a, a knife in the back through the heart of what our country is supposed to be. And many of you know that, but you don't understand all of the parameters. You don't understand what we've just gone through. And I hope that I can deliver this in a very, very abbreviated manner to try to connect with you because there's never been a more important time than the information that I'm revealing to you because everybody's maneuvering on all that aren't part of the MAGA zombie apocalypse and the I don't know three what was it the three ring circus and the big tent of all of these idiots that compromise what is now going to be our Donald Trump's cabinet, for example, and many of you are reacting to that. But on the so-called Democratic side or progressive or liberal or anybody who's not a fascist, okay, let's just put it that way. And there's a lot of people that aren't fascists that are professionals and people that believe in democracy and all of those things that really constitute what the United States has been really throughout most of our lifetimes and for a long period before that. That they never in a million years could imagine the United States being a fascist country. But as I've been mentioning for a long time, we're a corporate fascist state. We have been a corporate fascist state for a long time. And that's one of the things that I'm a pathway through in this giant maze to try to get your mind and your bandwidth to fully appreciate and understand in the context of corruption, births, and fuels fascism. I can't tell you how many people over the course of the last 2 weeks were like on, posts on Twitter, posts that I've had on my threads, and they're like, okay, so what's the answer? And it feels like Groundhog Day because I've delivered the answer. All you have to do is have the capacity to read, and it probably helps if you have a college education. It probably helps if you've been in the workforce for a while. It probably helps if you're an adult. It probably helps if you're a professional. And those are a lot of different kinds of groups, but it's the truth. It's the $71 trillion truth, which is the revelation of the largest criminal conspiracy and cover up in history that never ends. And that has created this situation that we're in the midst of that I need to address and to try to formulate some sort of maze through your heart, mind, and soul so that you understand that I am the face of the resistance. I didn't choose to be the savior, and I'm not the savior. The truth is, I'm just the deliverer. But what does that mean in context to what we're seeing in all of this insanity? There is no aspect of what I refer to and what some understand intuitively is the Wall Street revolving door meritocracy that is basically expressed through Rachel Maddow, for example, are all things on the losing side of, let's say, the Democratic Party, i.e., the DNC and Jen Psaki and all of these guys that have been a part of this thing going back to the Obama administration and many long before that. But they lost. They, with all of their effort, and Rachel Maddow did a magnificent job alongside Lawrence O'Donnell, who is the best of the best of the best at truth bomb riffing with all of the professionals like Lawrence Tribe and Andrew Weissman and other contributors at MSNBC. Yeah, they truth bombed the hell out of Donald Trump. They gave us a lot of introspection in a way that should have turned 70 plus million people out to the voting booths, at least 81 million, like who voted for Biden. And of course, we're 13 million under that, supposedly for all sorts of reasons, which primarily the most, I think, plausible one is election suppression that happened in a lot of swing states, particularly of the minority African American vote. And I've seen some very compelling evidence of that. But they lost. And they lost in a gargantuan way. And for those of you who have been following me on X, sharing me on X and everything else, you knew that I was all in considering the binary choice that we had. And I would never have gone, even though if there was a good third party candidate, myself included, easily towards that if someone actually had presented a plan, i.e., not Jill Stein. But I thought that the Harris Walsh ticket was definitely worthy of the situation, particularly in light of all things Trump and the insurrection and what had happened previously in the last 9 years and the relationship with Putin, and then what ultimately revealed itself over the last year, but 6 months on overdrive, the relationship with Elon Musk. And one of my biggest pet peeves, particularly on X, was that I was broadcasting that, look, Elon Musk had created the largest propaganda platform in history. He would have made Joseph Goebbels smile with giddy glee that that was even possible. And I kept projecting, proclamating, posting that Elon Musk didn't shell out the $43 billion to purchase X, that it was part of a consortium, a cabal, that it included, among others, private equity interests, too big to fail banks, the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, which was already in with, by the way, Ken Dorsey prior to that. And as we learned, I think a couple of major Russian oligarchs that were facilitating conversation between Putin and Elon, sometime before the election. And all of it was just incredibly straightforward. It was just so easy to at least question, if not pull the threads, particularly if you're the New York Times or the Department of Justice or MSNBC. And Rachel Maddow, for example, and same with the New York Times, didn't bother to tackle the Elon Musk threat until literally 2 days before the election. And what, as I recall, both espoused, and the New York Times gave us more information. It was quite interesting, but it didn't move the election. It was mostly kind of an article that was a third down on the front page that, if you happen to have an online version, understands the placement of that was such that it wasn't, the end of times, or what did Elon or Elton John say? The war is declared and God is dead and the war is declared. You remember that wonderful song "Leave On" by Elton John? It wasn't quite that huge as a headline, but it was definitely something that caught my attention, a lot of other people's attention. And what it brought attention to was that the Pentagon was kind of at wit's end, because Elon Musk, through Starlink and SpaceX, were delivering solutions to the speed of threat, was the quote in the New York Times, that the Pentagon needs. And meanwhile, I had been, referring to Elon as Fat Spectre. And for those of you who are young who don't know who Spectre is the ultimate villain of James Bond films, really going back to the 50s, which was this kind of international global cabal of very wealthy people who were usurping the power of national governments. And a lot of times that's who James Bond's character was always up against. That was his nemesis in many films, and in a variety of characters. But Spectre was definitely one of the most long serving and the most important, particularly the last, I don't know, decade of James Bond films. And that's who exactly Elon Musk is, because of his thumb on the information war that was promulgated through low altitude satellites that obviously SpaceX and Starlink were able to throw out around the world, which gives information to anybody who needs it to give them a leg up on responding or threat assessments and all of those types of things that somebody like the Pentagon on a global scale would need, right? But yet they were all witnessing what I'm revealing to you, that Elon had put his thumb with this cadre of villains behind him to, on the one hand, I think that they've said throw $170 million into supporting Trump in a variety of ways. And I don't know what the analytics are on that, but that's an extremely significant amount of money. But let's call a spade a spade. The Harris campaign raised 1.5 billion. Now, Kamala Harris, in fact, this was in the New York Times today. There was a little bit of an assessment. It wasn't a forensic audit where the money went. But I think many of you have kind of seen that the likes of Lady Gaga, Beyonce, let's see, who else was up there? What can I think of? Everybody's favorite rock and roller from New Jersey. Whoa, we're living. Why can't I think of his name? That's so funny. It's like I've only known him for decades. Anyway, you know who I'm referring to. And it'll come to me in just a minute, as it frequently does. But the idea was that the Harris campaign, and justifiably so, paying for the concert performances and so on and so forth, because you got to get people to set up the stages and the crew and the sound and all of the logistics to make it a great performance and that sort of thing. And the New York Times had assessed that, yeah, the artists supposedly weren't paid directly, although I've seen plenty of posts that said, for example, Oprah Winfrey got paid, right? And then you've got to just think, well, how much did Barack Obama get paid, right? And so you're thinking about this whole construct, and it's like, well, who's paying for that production? Well, donors. Who are the donors? Are they you, me, and everybody you see? I mean, was it the small donors like Obama got back in 2008? No, they were the multinational billionaire apparatus. And so, what does that mean? If you're paying, for example, let's say Beyonce and Lady Gaga and I hate to even think Eminem and Bruce Springsteen, among others, who's obviously Bon Jovi. How can I forget the name Bon Jovi? And you know, were they paid over and above? I mean, we're talking about a political campaign in the face of this massive fascism. Do they have to line up and they have to pay all these guys through their agents like they're doing some sort of commercial tour or something like that? Did it have the same sort of parameters? And I'm like, geez, that's a little bit, shocking. It's a little bit for, anybody cynical and jaded, like, oh my God, really? You got to pay for that sort of, celebrity endorsement? Okay, so I roll my eyes at that, and I raise an eyebrow, and it kind of bums me out in a lot of ways. But I can tell you, Obama has gotten paid a whole lot behind the scenes forever because of the information that I provide you, which really is the ground zero of this whole thing. Now, if you know who I am, I'm not blaming Obama. Obama didn't create the problems that he had to walk into, but there's a lot of reasons Obama did what he did and maybe why he is who he is. But I'll save that for another day. That's not the point of this truth bomb rip. The long and the short of it is, as much as paying celebrities for endorsements, if that's exactly what happened, and we'll never see the forensic audit on that, in context to, for example, what I call the right wing MAGA zombie apocalypse that used billionaire funds in a whole incredibly diverse way for now years, probably near a decade, way beyond that. If you go back to all of these right wing billionaire modus operandi of big money, going back literally to um, right after Jim Crow would have come. God, who are the guys down in Texas? Jesus, I can't even think of the name, but this goes back to the 50s. And once again, that'll come to me just like it did Bon Jovi. But I mean, really, the far right echo chamber has been very sophisticated for decades. Okay. I mean, going back to um, really before, and this is all stuff that Rachel Maddow had revealed. I mean, America First, this is great work that Rachel Maddow did. America First, which was a big far right anti war movement from the standpoint of isolationism before World War II, in the sort of expression of the KKK and white right wing supremacists, was called America First. That in Rachel Maddow's prescient work, she had revealed that they were also getting direct, I don't want to call it assistance, it was funding. I mean, they were complicit, they were part of the same machine with the actual Nazis and the industrialists in Germany, which had relationships with industrialists in the United States, like Henry Ford and many others. There's a fantastic movie that I've referenced many, many times that came out about 2 years ago that stars Christian Bale and John David Washington and Margot Robbie. It's called Amsterdam, directed by David O. Russell, which was magnificent and stars Robert De Niro. And I don't think it got nearly as much attention as it should have, which is interesting, all things considered. But, they laid out that this America First thing were literally completely allied with the Nazis. And when you look back at the history and all of the stuff that preceded what MAGA now emulated, because it all came through Steve Bannon, who knew this information, and then Rachel Maddow got hip to it. I don't know who her contacts were within the FBI, the CIA, or historians that basically shed light on it. But from Rachel Maddow's perspective of shifting from the nightly anchor of MSNBC into a one-day a week presence for the last 4 years before the last 6 months and before the election, where she was doing this work, and she's going to continue to do it with documentaries and podcasts and that sort of thing. And she gets paid $42 million a year to do this, by the way. And she did some magnificent work in Ultra to reveal to us this hidden history that not all of us knew. And I thought I knew a lot about American history, and I didn't know all the details. That also included what blew my freaking mind was during Senator McCarthy's run for the presidency, they had been involved in electioneering scheming using fraudulent documents to steal the Electoral College, which is important because I put that in what we call the precepts of the Clean New Deal, which is what are the answers to everything that we're in the midst of. So if you want to come back to this later, you can go to www.thecleannewdeal.org. And all of this information that I'm revealing to you is there, and then some, particularly the most important part, which is the one thing that nobody on the face of the earth is going to reveal to you, that I revealed to you, which is the revelation how Federal Reserve Act 13.3 was used illegally to backdoor tens of trillions of dollars to a financial system that became a global racketeering enterprise. That happened a long time ago. It blew up in 2008. It kind of got remedied because of this backdoor scenario that I told you between 2012 through 2019. And then it happened again in 2022. But yet it's just seeded this situation to where somebody like, for example, Elon Musk tripled his wealth during COVID. And I've got many truth bomb riffs on how that happened and the technicalities of it all. But going back to Rachel Maddow and the point of Ultra and MAGA being a right-wing fascist movement that Steve Bannon put together, a consortium of very capable, smart, resourceful, and quite frankly, diabolically genius bastards that include the Mercers and Sheldon Adelson's fortune and others on the right wing, particularly those like that were infiltrating the Supreme Court that ProPublica did magnificent work to reveal to us 2 years ago that the Supreme Court was corrupt, particularly the right-wing justices, many of whom were appointed by this Koch-led affair over the course of decades that gave us Chief Justice John Roberts, that going back to Clarence Thomas, that winds up, through MAGA and all of the new blood. Who knows how long this corruption has been going on, but Kavanaugh and Comey or Barrett, right? All that was assisted along by the Republican Party and the donors and their capture of the courts. And then ultimately, when you sit on the Supreme Court and you're a guy like Justice Clarence Thomas, you're getting paid directly by Harlan Crow, the billionaire real estate tycoon from Dallas, to where he's providing luxury vacations, a luxury RV, buying his mother a house, education for, I think, a nephew, things like direct corruption, which, of course, Sheldon Whitehouse, senator from Delaware, has been, prior to before this election, trying to, infiltrate all of that corruption to kind of create further ethics for the Supreme Court justices. When I've said all along, and this is a part of my precept of the Clean New Deal, we don't need ethics for the Supreme Court. We need the law to take down corrupt actors on the Supreme Court so that they can't facilitate fascism. So my prediction before the 2024 election was that I was convinced that Kamala Harris, Tim Walz were going to win the election in the popular vote in a big way. I thought they were going to win by 10 million votes. I'll never forget, and I posted the day after, which has gotten 200,000 views. It was extraordinary how that slipped through all of the goalie sort of tactics of X. But I proclamated that and I know millions of you out there feel the same way. We thought that Trump was going to try to steal the election. He all but said it, but then he kept saying in the waning days of the election, I don't need the votes. So I think there was some real shady shit going on, and I've read all of the stuff about potentially Starlink and Elon and whatever Putin was involved with, but I don't have the analytics, so I can't really nail that down. I heard some great stuff by boy, what's his name? The great journalist that now works for the Guardian. But anyway, it's all about election suppression for minorities is a big part of it. That could have led to, like, 13 million votes that didn't show up, right, in the swing states that would have skewed the election. But it appeared that the Republicans got the trifecta. Not only did they get Trump elected, but they got Congress, and Congress came, at the end, but they got the Senate, and they already had the Supreme Court. And what I've been telling you guys for a long time, and the way I calculate this, or I create the formula, is that we're not a democracy. This last election wasn't a fight for democracy, even though many people thought that, and that was part of the platitudes and the pitch of the national divorce and let's move forward and all of those things that the Harris campaign I thought did well. Obviously not well enough, but you can't etch a sketch the last 15 years of what I'm revealing to you, which is the largest criminal conspiracy in cover up in history that gave us this corporate fascist state. And this is literally what we are before the fascism that we're now in the midst of. We're a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate, which, as I show you for free, because all of the American people buy our lies, in the con at www.thecon.tv, where we have provided the full faith and credit of the United States illegally, which is socialism for criminals, which was tens of trillions of dollars, to this billionaire apparatus that we made above the law and above market forces so they could skull fuck the United States. And that's what they're doing. And it's a global international cabal. The war in the election was not a populist movement of we the people, not even remotely. It was the billionaires of the Wall Street meritocracy who were betting on Kamala and Wallace to basically, give us change we can believe in part two, because they had their guy Obama who let them get away with all of this stuff. And that's what they were cool with. And, Kamala had basically passed the test 13, 14 years ago by everything that I revealed to you. And she's a good person and she's smart, and she really would have made a great president. She would have made a better president if we were able to do as my strategy and my tactics throughout this entirety through X were trying to proclamate, which was we had to get to Tim Walz, because former Attorney General Eric Holder was in charge of the DNC selection for the VP candidate, and he's directly responsible for everything that I'm telling you, by the way. And they came up with Tim Walz, and they came up with Tim Walz, if you're, a little bit aware and a little bit jaded and aware of satire and also cynical. And you think about, okay, here's this white football coach that won a state championship, who's an honest broker, and he's really a good guy, and he didn't come out of the Beltway. He didn't come out of a white shoe law firm, and he didn't come out of a hedge fund or a private equity firm or anything else where you get, like JD Vance, completely turned into like a Frankenstein creature. As far as I'm concerned, Tim Walz was the real deal, is the real deal. And that's why pretty much the way I was creating what we needed to do with the Clean New Deal was to try to get what would become VP Tim Walz, because he had showed, and I had thought this when they had first announced him, that he's not a liar. And he can't lie. He said on the campaign trail, we got to get rid of the Electoral College. And Kamala or Harris campaign walked that back. Yeah, we're not going there. Because I was absolutely convinced that not only was Kamala going to win the popular vote, how can you lose when you got Bruce Springsteen and Eminem and Beyonce and Oprah and all of these other guys that apparently got paid, at least in a social media construct? How can you lose when you've got, they reach hundreds of millions of people, right? And that's where they were spending a whole lot of their money. But if I didn't make the point clearly enough, that, and this is where I come in, probably more to my reality than anything, they were also spending tens of millions of dollars through digital agencies to what they call influencers. And I saw these vectors all over X. So for the most part, you see everything Elon, you see everything like the MAGA zombie apocalypse, from Tucker Carlson to Alex Jones to Vivek Ramaswamy to, of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene to Megyn Kelly and the whole Fox apparatus. Yeah, that's all there on X, right? In a monumental way. And not to mention the way they program, pardon me, the way they program the whole thing, which was to churn out tens of lies, tens of millions of lies, literally per second. And that goes back to my point earlier. How is the New York Times and Rachel Maddow and everybody else not, locking onto that? 6 months before. Well, because they thought they had it in the bag, because they're looking at the exit polls, they're looking at all of the data that all of these, the apparatuses and the Beltway do to see who people are going to vote for and everything else. And they were banking on that. And that's a structure that's been around, quite frankly, since about the 90s. Okay. Maybe the 80s. But it's the old school kind of mentality. So I think they thought they had it locked up. But in the social media brand, in addition to what I just said about the MAGA zombie apocalypse, which I refer to on the media side as the pimps, whores, junkies, and parasites, that are everybody from Marjorie Taylor Greene and, of course, all of these idiots in Congress that were already there, that the billionaire class shoved down the throats of voters, because billionaires are stupid people whisperers. Or, sorry, the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Warren Hobart and all the rest of them, and that guy from New York, who I want to call Dirty Sanchez. The Dirty Sanchez. Sorry, it's kind of is a little bit out of bounds. Why can't I think of his name? That the guy that really was up for all sorts of charges from Congress. Why can't I think of his name? Maybe I put his name out of my head because he was like the fabulous Mr. Ripley or whatever that was, right? That freak, man. Anyway, which, by the way, follows the pattern of what I revealed to you in the con at www.thecon.tv. Because what the financial industry did and what the housing industry did was they hired probably hundreds of thousands of people that were working in fast food and other things, and they taught them to lie, steal, and cheat to be able to create grifter liars lens that created this incredible pipeline of the largest racketeering enterprise in the history of the world, that they knew they were going to get bailed out by the United States. That's part and parcel to what I reveal, which reveals Federal Reserve Act 13.3. But this has been around for a long time. What you do is you hire dumb people who don't know any better, you teach them wrong, and then you incentivize them with a lot of money to do the wrong things. You design the whole thing to blow up. That's what Congress has become. That's what this whole, Trump cabinet is. Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, what this Christo nationalist white supremacist dude who's going to lead up the Secretary of Defense, who came out of Fox News, and the list goes on. Yeah, people, I know that's driving you absolutely insane and batty, as it should, but you can't cry about it after the fact. And my broader point of this whole thing, these lying vectors that were paid for by the DNC, that were basically delivering, while Elon was delivering tens of millions of lies per second, these other DNC funded, vectors through these digital agencies to, and I'll just name a couple. I mean, I try to put a lot of their names out of my head, but Mayo is Spicy comes to mind. And I know she was real, okay? But I know she was paid to just do her shtick, okay? But there's all these other, like Candy, this or that, or, you see this thumbnail of like somebody that you could see hanging out with at a coffee shop or at a bar talking shop, who might have a political science degree or have some, reference of politics and be interested in that sort of thing. And they look like somebody that you'd want to know, that speaks your language and everything else. But what they were doing is they were echoing the echo chamber hyperbole platitudes. Sorry, hyperbole wasn't right in this analogy. Platitudes of the Harris Walsh campaign, right? Turn the page. We're done with that. We're not going back. And by the way, we're not going back was a great slogan, considering where we are now, which is not even funny. We're in a place that we've never been. We're in a place that, given what Rachel Maddow shows to us in Ultra, had America First won, particularly they had this, Madison Square Garden event in 1939. I think it was 1939. It was where, and that led to, by the way, this David O. Russell film called Amsterdam, which was magnificent. But, where there was this white supremacist movement in the United States. Oh, surprise, right? We had Jim Crow. I mean, we've always been this way. By the way, our Jim Crow laws influenced Adolf Hitler and the Nazis with the Nuremberg laws, just so you know. And so, yeah, they were marching lockstep. Now, truth be told, Hitler thought the Americans were nothing even to think about. He never even thought we were a threat to him, because he was focused on Russia and all things Europe at the time. So, he really didn't think of us as, and we weren't, by the way, a global superpower the way we became during World War II. But had all of those guys won, we'd be in the situation that we're now looking down the barrel of a rifle, uh, or worse, right? This is real fascism. So when I said juxtapose that we're not a democracy before, nor are we a capitalist system, which is what I revealed to you in our work, www.thecon.tv, and also www.thecleannewdeal.org. The manifestations of all of this stuff have just delivered this biggest shit sandwich in history that they're going to shove down your throat. When I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, I fell in love with The Clash. Joe Strummer was my favorite guy of all time. And there was a song, one of my favorite songs of all time, called The Clampdown. And that's what this is. It's history repeating itself, whereas what Mark Twain would say, history rhymes. Same as it ever was, is what David Byrne, the prophet, said. And he's right. All of this stuff goes on because humans are relatively predictable. Like I've said in many truth bombs, I think we've got about six different versions of our psychology. And I learned long ago, in fact, I learned this in the making of my first film, which was like a real walk down the rabbit hole for me in the Matrix and everything else, where I figured it all out. And I think this is the story of history. We've got two columns of our soul. You've got courage, dignity, integrity, and character versus hypocrisy, duplicity, and hypocrisy, duplicity, complicity, and quite frankly, weakness of the soul. The greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he didn't exist. So these vectors for the DNC that have been lying to you in social media to promulgate Obama 2.0 did so to prevent you from hearing the truths that I have. And we're closer on the same page. I'm not I'm not a socialist. I'm not a Leninist revolutionary. I believe in a hybrid government. I believe that there should be a social safety net. I understand fiat currency. I understand productive capacity. I understand what the United States did before World War II when we had Keynesian economics take us out of the Great Depression, which is part and parcel to this stuff. By the way, the reason we came up with Federal Reserve Act 13.3 was because of the Great Depression. We created these hybrid private public partnerships that took the form of what we call government sponsored enterprises. And so the first one that was created by the Federal Reserve to get us out of the Great Depression was stuff like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And then others that came later with the Veterans Administration and so on and so forth. But ultimately, the United States was at that time on the gold standard. We've been on the fiat currency standard, which is the oil standard since 1971 at Bretton Woods. And that's part and parcel of this whole thing. But the information I'm providing to you is that there were literally, and you got to juxtapose it this way and just briefly, and I could obviously go on. And if you want to discover more, please dig into my truth bomb riffs that I've got over 500 of them, 530 of them on Patrick Level Truth Bombs the Con on YouTube. And, what I've been trying to animate and proclamate and position and make everybody understand was that, yes, Donald Trump is the emperor's new clothes on really bad acid, but he was also the red carpet revelation of everything that we are, because the corruption that enabled him gave birth to him and then ultimately led to his triumph. And it wasn't his triumph. Donald Trump was the mastermind of nothing. Donald Trump was a tool this whole time of this establishment that's been going on for a very long time, from the Jim Crow to John Birch to America First to whatever came after that, probably in the 70s, that went a little bit undercover, but then that would ultimately come back to the Koch enterprises and Fox News and everything else over the course of the last decades, which you marionette and you manipulate dumb people that can go to mega churches and you put a phony cross on it and you tell them, this is their mission. I happened to see on a Korean car yesterday a sticker that encapsulates it all. It was surrounded, I think it had a picture of 1776, and this is the insane irony of this whole thing. Okay, it had 1776 in the middle, obviously the birth of the United States, which was created to destroy tyranny, to create separation of powers, to create the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, to create separation of powers, to make sure that all of this didn't happen. And so this branding irony to try to put it in this encapsulation of Christo nationalism is that they had this sticker had on it. Again, I got to emphasize, on a Korean car. It said 1776. By the way, American cars are made with Korean parts. I can assure you that, by the way, from recent experience. But it said 1776 in the middle, but it said um, pro life, pro gun, pro God. What was the last one? It was probably pro USA, I guess. I mean, it was just kind of encapsulated in this package, right? Which is religious theocracy, which is what I call the MAGA zombie apocalypse, which is the complete antithesis of the American dream, i.e., the birthplace of fighting tyranny. And the founding fathers had all of these different brilliant juxtapositions of psychology and power because they knew what power was and they didn't trust it. So they wanted to basically not atomize. They wanted to, what is it called when you spread out the risk? I'll just leave it at that. Spread out the risk. But that's what they did, and then they created like you know scenarios where, including the electoral college, even though when it was created was their whole idea was, look, you can't have the masses dictate how things were going to work, particularly if you think back to 1776. And a lot of people always, take issue with the hypocrisy of the founders because they're like, well, yeah, I mean, we had the two-thirds, person clause where African Americans weren't citizens, they were slaves, or women didn't have a right to vote. Obviously, the natives didn't have a right to vote, and yada, 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 just white landowning gentry. Okay. Yeah. Well, but they weren't King George III, and they took on King George III of the most powerful military and navy in the history of the world, and they laid it all out on the line. They give me liberty or give me death to create the dynamism of the American dream in order to form a more perfect union, of course, which Barack Obama, so elegantly and brilliantly laid out. And I came to a real revelation recently that I'm not sure that Obama knows all the stuff that I know. Honestly, I think that's part of the process. They think they made sure that he was sequestered in a way that he didn't know everything Eric Holder was up to. But going back to where we have to go now. Okay, so look, guys, it's a complete mess. It's a shit show. We have the MAGA zombie apocalypse on our doorstep. Fascism is real. I'm getting completely dialed down and throttled down on X, even though I think I peaked at 11,000 followers. I've lost 500 followers in the last week, last 4 days, actually. But yet I've got more followers every single day than I've ever had before. And people are following me, but they don't know if they can trust me. They don't know if they understand what I'm saying. Most people who are commenting are like, just show me the way. Tell me what we have to do, which is what I'm doing. Rachel Maddow cannot be the leader of the resistance. She gets paid $42 million a year to prevent you from understanding what it is that I'm revealing to you. Because they did this, they gave the opportunity of the Confederate international white Christo, let's call it religious theocracy, that's at work here for the fossil fuel future. That's all it is. It's the Saudis and it's Putin and it's Wall Street guys that are involved with all of the. I mean, we could have gone the other way, 20 years ago. Everything that I'm telling you now, I've known since at least 1998. Okay. It's just the level of depravity and lies and deception has just gone to this massive art because, and I've always, referenced this before as well, that one of the greatest lines that came from the greatest series in the history of series television, although the Penguins definitely getting up there for me, but Game of Thrones. And at the end, when Jon Snow had this massive meeting to try to get all of the major power players together to be able to unite to fight the existential threat, which was the army of the dead. Hint, hint, MAGA zombie apocalypse and fascism. But yet he had already pledged allegiance, and I'm using the pop cultural reference because most of you would be able to relate to this more than the dynamics of history, of American history or global history for all that matters. Because that's just the world we live in, right? And so what Jon Snow said, or sorry, Tyrion Lannister had juxtaposed the question because the whole drama, the whole thing was loyalty, and Daenerys Targaryen had demanded, her nephew's loyalty, and everybody knows what that means. But Jon Snow pledged his loyalty, and when they were having this meeting of the minds, Cersei Lannister was saying, "Well, I'm not going to do this unless you pledge your loyalty to me, because I'm not giving up my grip on the Iron Throne." And ultimately, he told the truth because what he said was, when Tyrion Lannister asked him, "Why did you do that?" I mean, didn't you realize that it was easier to just lie and we get what we want, and then maybe we win because now we're not going to win. But Jon Snow said, look, man, when everybody lies, all you get is better lies, and words stop meaning anything. Yeah, we've been in that situation, guys, for a very long time. And so who am I? Patrick Lovell, guys, you got to understand the New York Times has lied to you. The Washington Post has lied to you. The Los Angeles Times has lied to you. They're all owned by billionaires and billionaire apparatuses. Everybody was talking about this right before the election when the owner of the LA Times, or yeah, the LA Times, and of course, um, the owner of the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, and all things Amazon. They weren't going to write an op-ed to endorse Kamala because they're part of the grift. Just like the industrialists back in the late 30s that were like, they were hedging their risk based on Adolf Hitler. They didn't want democracy. They wanted complete control. But this is what happens when you give, a dictator all the power. You think you're going to be able to play ball with this guy. And as Hitler intimated, no, you're not. I'm going to murder everybody, including you. Complicity, duplicity, let's add in stupidity. Okay. And again, who is Patrick Lovell, man? I am a capitalist. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a producer, but I understand the nature of fiat currency, Keynesian economics, and the power of the United States and the safety nets and everything else. And yeah, you have to have a dynamic society where you have to have a hybrid society. Anybody who knows the military, police, firemen, teachers, everything else, that's socialism, people. That's our taxes paying for that. But guess what? Our taxes don't fund the government. The debt isn't like Elon Musk says that the United States is going to go into bankruptcy. They're trying to put the United States into bankruptcy so they can get rid of our sovereign wealth, global hegemony, so that they can, basically create this cryptocurrency with the Russians, all based on fossil fuel, and create their own dollar sort of global reserve currency for the billionaire and the fascist class that are now religious theocracy. That's literally what's going on with Elon Musk playing Spectre. And I didn't get paid like all of these tens of millions of vectors of lies to ruminate and echo chamber Kamala Harris's platitudes, because I'm the guy that's got the $71 trillion truth. There's 1,000 billion and a trillion. Elon Musk is now worth over $300 billion. Think about this and how absurd this whole thing is, okay? Even if Elon, which he could have easily done, stroked a check to Jack Dorsey and the board and everything else for $43 billion, and it wouldn't even had a big impact on at least the wealth on paper that Elon Musk has. But Elon Musk gained $70 billion in money on, or I should say, wealth on paper last week after Donald Trump won the election. How about that? So he's worth like north of $300 billion to basically put all of his money with Putin and Saudi and all of the major players together to create this insanity that, and it just boggles my mind and it blows my mind and it hurts me to no end, because Dana White, who I actually like, and I like the UFC, and Joe Rogan are just another vector of bullshit for this insanity. And I don't think Joe Rogan fully comprehends what he's in the midst of, and he kind of just says that he got talked into it by Dana White. Maybe that's true, but I'm the guy with a $71 trillion truth, and there's 1,000 billion and a trillion. I have all of the evidence of everything that I'm revealing to you, and then some. And again, it's all in the Clean New Deal at www.thecleannewdeal.org. Millions of people are hoping that somebody is going to come to the rescue. Nobody's coming to the rescue that has your interest in mind. I am. I'm not your savior. The truth is, I'm just the deliverer because I did the work. And for whatever reason, it's my DNA, it's my construct. You want to know a little bit more about me just to kind of have some, context? I mean, I'm a 56-year-old divorced guy because of all of this stuff. My life came on hard times because of all of this stuff. I'm rebounding in a lot of really great ways. That I'm part of this situation, not fascism or corruption, but I'm talking about, projects and stuff that I'm in the midst of, which are great. I don't depend on billionaires for these, fortunately, but it's getting harder and harder and harder because most of the apparatus of financial investment and everything is And there's still a market out there, but I really do believe capitalism is what's going to save us from this perspective. Not capitalism in the sense of what I'm describing to you, because that's not capitalism. That's corporate fascism undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses the full faith and credit of the United States to create, to backstop this massive mafiocracy slash cryptopia that's now paying for fascism. No, it's your buy-in to discover who I am, see the work that we provided for free at www.thecleannewdeal, sorry, www.thecon.tv. And we provided it for free because all the American people buy our lies and it cost millions of dollars to do. And yeah, I got quashed. For anybody who paid attention to the David Pecker revelations and the hush money trial, that was the only thing that Alvin Bragg and the government got right to give Donald Trump 34 criminal, felony convictions that obviously Judge Mershon failed to prosecute, or I should say, do the, when the judge provides whatever the outcome is based on, what the sentence is going to be served. Sentencing. Sorry, I couldn't think of that name. But I love football. I love competition. I was a football player. I was a good athlete my whole life. I played rugby. I'm a mountain climber. I'm a skier. I'm a surfer. I'm a water skier. But I've never been the best at any of those things. I was very, I don't know, good at a lot of them. And so I revere people who are the best. And I happened to post this the other day on X. Donald Trump is a shitty golfer and he cheats at golf, which is your first sort of red carpet revelation to understand this guy's fucking full of shit, as is his entire apparatus, which bums me out that they get to be seen with like Jones last night, right? Who are the real deal in UFC. Those guys train in it, but they're all kissing the ring because of Dana White and all this other stuff. And I do believe in the meritocracy. I love punk rock. I love dropkick Murphys. My name's Patrick. I love to, back in the old days, I brawl. Fortunately, I'm over that, but I certainly know how to fight in the trenches. I used to slam dance like a madman, and I used to have a very hard head, and I used to headbutt people when I needed to. But, I got a hard head. Maybe that's the only reason I'm still in this game, man. So anyway, that's a long, sort of hopefully prolific way to hopefully energize you, because it's up to you. And so what I'll finish with is what I always finish with, uh, given what we're in the midst of, is you have to become the universal truth. And let me explain what that means. First, when you live in light, you live in truth. When you live a lie, you're depraved. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. When you live a lie, inside you die. Stop buying lies. Stop lying. The universal truth, and I'm not a physicist, I'm not a cosmologist, I'm just kind of somebody who has a passing interest in this, but it is the nature of the way the world works, or the universe works, right? Light overcomes darkness through the supernova of energy. So I've got the Big Bang of truth. Everything came from the singularity to create the possibilities that are endless, honestly. And I remain an optimist because I know that there's millions of you out there that are seeking the truth. But you've got to understand, I've got it. Nobody else does. And again, that's why I continue to say that I'm not your savior. The truth is, I'm just the deliverer. And I don't want to put myself above you or anybody else. I want you to work with me to create a movement where millions of us unite with the truth to force the truth down the throats of the wicked and the perverted and the sick and all of these other things that we're in the midst of. It's what our country did to win the revolution. It's what our country did to win the Civil War. It's what our country did to win the war against fascism. And this stuff happens. It's not necessary to hope to persevere. So that's my message to you. I hope you'll reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm on Blue Sky now. I don't remember what my handle is. I'm losing viewers on X, but I'm also gaining them. I think X is a place that I have to stay just to kind of, try to force this out there in as many ways as possible. But there's millions of you out there, unless millions of you have already left. But I'm on YouTube at Patrick Level Truth Bombs the Con, and on X at Patrick Level 1. So Anyway, I'm kind of carrying on now. I don't have any idea how long I went on. It's Sunday. I want to get on to other things, probably about 45 minutes. Thank you for listening. Again, please unite with me because when we, the people, come together with the truth, we will bulldoze the misery of tyranny to recreate the renaissance of possibility. And I may as well finish off on this because this is the questions that I had asked. And this is really what the Clean New Deal is all about. Given all of the information I have, you want to be like, well, what's the answer, right? Well, you got to reconfigure the architecture of our democracy. We've got to recreate Glass-Steagall, which is the ability to get and the casino bank's ability to play with other people's money and then be backstopped by the full faith and credit of the United States. That's first and foremost. Second, we obviously have to get rid of Citizens United. We got to get rid of legalized corruption and billions of dollars in the shadows that perpetuate this madness that has created this massive corruption. We're going to reveal that $71 trillion was looted by a tiny percentage of the population for this billionaire apparatus. And given all the problems that we have and more to come, it's going to get much, much worse under Donald Trump. How $71 trillion can be better spent to prevent all of the shit that's going on. And then we got to get rid of the perversity of our so called democracy, which is ruled by the minority because billionaires can game the system with the complicity of the pimps, whores, junkies, and parasites. Got to get rid of qualified immunity. You can't allow cops to shoot people without them going through the legal process like everybody else. We've got to get rid of judicial immunity. We can't have ethics standards only for the Supreme Court. We have to hold them accountable for corruption. We got to reverse once we get 13 judges on the Supreme Court, which isn't going to happen anytime soon. But we've got to end presidential immunity. That's just such a slap in the face of the American Revolution and what the American dream is all about. And then, like I said, we have to end the Electoral College. And some people had suggested to me, we got to end term limits. Okay, yeah, we should absolutely end term limits. But what we have to do before any of that, because we're looking down the barrel of the next 4 years, is we've got to unite. Tens of millions of us have to be on the same page. And that means you've got to share Patrick Lovell, the producer, and the con and the Clean New Deal to become a nuclear reaction to the Big Bang of truth. Thanks, guys, for listening. I appreciate you. I wish you all the best. I hope you're doing okay. I do. But we're not going to be okay unless millions of us find courage to do this because you can't fight with one hand tied behind your back, and you can't fight without the knowledge of how things work. That's what I'm delivering to you. Thanks for listening.